Bell, Berryhill, Block, Blumenfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Butler, Calderon, Campos, Carter, Cedillo, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fuhr, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Gaggiani, Garrick, Gatto, Gordon, Gorell, Grove, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Waso, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lotta, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mansour, Mendoza, Miller, Mitchell, Monning, Morrell, Nistande, Nielsen, Norby, Olson, Pan, Perea, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Swanson, Torres, Valadeo, Wagner, Wykowski, Williams, Yamada, Mr. Speaker.
Members, a quorum is present. We ask everyone present to please stand for the prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Father Constantine Papadimos, to offer today's prayer.
Good morning. Let us pray. Lord, we can fill our lives with good things, noteworthy obligations, and impressive accomplishments, but good can sometimes be the enemy of best. Help us, Lord, to evaluate what we have and to move some things out in order to make room for what you have in store for us. Guide us to use the blessings you have given us to help other people, for your blessings are everlasting. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us in the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Yamada as she leads us in the pledge. Ms. Yamada. Thank you. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Thursday, April 7, 2011. Assembly met at 9 a.m. Honorable Fiona Moss, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly. Presiding Chief Gary Dustin Wilson at the desk. Reading card Timothy Moore. Reading the roll was called to Shaji and Alejo, Allen, Amiano, Atkins, Bell, Berryhill, Block, Blumenfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Butler, Calderon, Campos, Carter, Cedillo, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fuhrer, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Gagiani, Garrick, Gatto, Gordon, Grove, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Weso, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lara, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mansour, Mendoza, Miller, Mitchell, Monning, Morel, Nestande, Nielsen, Norby, Olson, Pan, Perea, Emmanuel Perez, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Swanson, Torres, Valadeo, Wagner, Wachowski, Williams, Yamada. Mr. Speaker, by unanimous consent, the regular order of business of the Assembly was dispensed with for this legislative day. By unanimous consent, the following Assembly members are granted leave of absences for the day on active military deployment and waiving per diem. Assembly Member Gorel to attend a funeral. Assembly Member Portantino. The following communication was presented by the Speaker in order to be printed in the journal. Dear Dodson, pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I'm referring Assembly Bill 113 Monty to the Health Committee upon receipt to the Senate. In addition, I'm requesting unanimous consent to suspend Joint Rule 62A and Assembly Rule 56 for the purpose of setting Assembly Bill 113 for the hearing in Health Committee on Thursday, April 7th upon call of the Chair. Sincerely, John A. Perez, Speaker of the Assembly. Assembly Rule 56 and Joint Rule 62A suspended without objection. Assembly Rule 56 and Joint Rule 62A were suspended to permit the Committee on Health to notice hearing of Assembly Bill 113 on Thursday, April 7, 2011, upon the call of the Chair, pending referral to the Committee.
Mr. Calderon moves and Ms. Conway seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction references of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the Governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assembly members Grove and Mendoza to have guests and photographers on the floor.
Without objection.
Also request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 118 to allow Assembly Member Morale to have a guest at his desk and a photographer on the floor.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assembly Members Fong, Ma, Miller, Torres, and Mr. Speaker to speak on adjourn in memory.
Without objection.
Also, pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, request unanimous consent to refer the following bills to committee. AB 405, Mr. Solorio, to the Higher Education Committee only.
Without objection.
AB 547 by Mr. Gatto, from the Housing and Community Development Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
AB 866 by Ms. Yamada, from the
Without objection.
AB 1292 by Mr. Hernandez, from the Elections and Redistricting Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
And AB 1151 from Public Employees Retirement and Social Security Committee to the Judiciary Committee and then back to the PERS Committee.
Without objection. Okay, we have some guest introductions. Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to introduce to you a few special guests among they're in the back. First, I want to introduce to you a school board member from the Los Nietos Unified School District. It is Los Nietos will turn 150 years this year. It's one of the oldest school districts in our state. We have the clerk from the Board of Trustees, and her name is Marisa Hernandez in the back. Marisa, thank you for joining us. And also, I would like to take a moment here to introduce some special guests that are in the back. It is well known that the Latino community is one of the fastest growing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is well known that the Latino community is one of the fastest growing segments of our population here in the United States and in California. This growth is resulting in a movement that is touching every part of American life. In fact, Latino households represent more than 900 billion in purchasing power today. At the heart of this movement is Univision Communications Incorporated. Univision is a premier media company serving Latinos in the United States that not only entertains but also is an important member of our community. Univision Communications is the leading Spanish language media company in the United States and is one of America's top networks regardless of language. During the July sweeps, it was the #1 network in broadcast prime time with adults ages 18 to 34. Univision connects with Latinos through their culture, through the resources, and through the marketplace, and that they do this through online, television, and radio. With us today, we have some executives in the back that I would like to introduce to you. They're representing different parts of our state. First, Maria Gutierrez, who services the Fresno area as a regional director and political sales director. Maria. We also have Ramon Pineda, senior vice president, visiting from New Jersey. We have Steve Stuck, vice president, general manager of here from Sacramento. Jaime Jimenez, station manager from San Francisco. Teresa Ford, vice president, general manager from Bakersfield. Maria Nava, community affairs director from KMEX Los Angeles. Angela Navarrete, market sales leader, Univision Radio from Fresno. Jose Valle, president of Univision Radio of Los Angeles. Peter Moore, senior vice president, Western regional manager, Univision Radio from San Diego. We have Tony Perlongo, GM, Univision Radio from San Francisco. George Ray, political specialist, Univision Corporate. Jose El Gorreaga, regional vice president for Northern California and representing Fresno. Aaron Scobie from Salinas. Margarita Wilder from San Diego. Victor Toco from Palm Desert. Carl Meyer from Entravision Radio. Addison Mayman from radio here in Sacramento. Leila Vela. Stockton Modesto. Marcelo Gaeta Tapia, vice president from Government and Government Affairs. And last but not least, Luis Fernandez Rocha, Vice President, Regional Director from Florida. Thank you all for being here, and I would like to give them a round of applause. If you want to take pictures in the back, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, members, we're going to go to business on the daily file. Second reading. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 783, 606, 313, 129, 184, 307, 309, 485, 798, 222 with amendments, 634, 45 with amendments, Assembly Joint Resolution 3 with amendments, Assembly Bill 380 with amendments, 528 with amendments, 64 with amendments, 1299 with amendments, and Assembly Bill 1162 with amendments.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Okay. Okay, members, we have one more guest introduction. Ms. Grove, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, along with my colleague Assemblyman David Valadeo, we're here to present resolutions in recognition of the recipients of California Ambulance Association Stars of Life Award. The Stars of Life celebration is a state event that honors dedicated ambulance services and professionals throughout California. The paramedic and emergency medical technicians that we have with us today are vital to our healthcare structure, serving as first responders for the medical industry. Each of these professionals has acted heroically in a life-threatening situation and is being honored for their dedication to saving lives and their concern for their patients. The award recipients are paramedic Nathan Kennedy, paramedic Kevin McClanahan, EMT Mike Grissom, paramedic George Baker, EMT Sebastian Chavez, paramedic Brandon McNamara, paramedic Alberto Alvarez, and EMT Claudia Andrade. Also joining us today is our Honorable Mayor of Bakersfield, Harvey Hall, the founder of Hall Ambulance Services of Kern County. Please help me recognize these individuals for their contribution to first responders and saving the lives of individuals.
Mr. Morrell would like to introduce some very special guests.
Yes, I'd like to introduce my daughter, Kristen, and perhaps in my opinion, one of the prettiest babies, my granddaughter, Cora. Thank you.
Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, members, pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to refer the following bills to committee. AB 366 by Mr. Allen from Health Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
And AB 735 by Mitchell from the Transportation Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection. Assembly third reading. File item 20, AB 80. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 80 by Assemblymember Fong, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Fong.
AB 80. Mr. Speaker and members, current law requires the presidential primary to occur on the first Tuesday in February and prohibits it from being consolidated with a statewide direct primary. Absent a change of this law, next year California will be required to hold 3 separate statewide elections, imposing a huge cost on the state and local governments at a time when our fiscal situation is in crisis. In addition, studies have shown that too many elections one year contributes to voter fatigue, decreasing participation on Election Day. California moved up our presidential primary in 2008 in the hopes of gaining more national influence on the selection of presidential candidates, only to find out that 33 other states moved up their primaries as well. The national political parties have adopted rules to sanction states who hold a primary or caucus before March or existing date is out of compliance with these rules. AB 80 eliminates California's standalone presidential primary election and requires that it be consolidated with other statewide primary elections. As a result, AB 80 will save the state and local governments close to $100 million on avoided election costs, increase voter participation, and ensure that California's primary is held in accordance with the national party rules. I respectfully request your aye vote.
Mr. Garrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join my colleague. I am also supporting AB 80. I rise in support today, and I'm happy to be co-authoring this. As just identified, this can save us up between $80 and $100 million in election money, and I'm going to urge my colleagues to vote yes on this. Thank you.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise in support of this bill, and I think it's an excellent bill, and I appreciate Mr. Fong wanting to save the taxpayers of California this amount of money. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 68, no 0. The measure passes. Okay. File items 21 through 25 pass and retain. File item 26, AB 362. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 362 by Assemblymember Bonnie Lowenthal, an act relating to elections.
Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 362 would modify the signature and declaration requirements of write-in candidates for Superior Court judge. A write-in challenge requires only 100 signatures, even in a county as big as Los Angeles. Worse, write-in candidates don't even have to show that they meet the constitutional requirements to hold the office. This flaw in the system came to light in 2008 when a known white supremacist took advantage of this low threshold to file write-in campaigns against 6 LA area judges with Hispanic surnames. This cynical harassment ploy was a waste of taxpayer money and election officials' time, since judges would have been left off the ballot if unopposed. AB 362 would stop that kind of mischief by increasing the signature requirement to 0.01% of registered voters, with a minimum of 100 and a maximum of 600 required signatures, depending on the size of the county. It would also require the candidate's filing statement to declare that they meet the constitutional requirements for the office of judge. The bill has no opposition, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no question or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 46, noes 18. The measure passes. File items 28 and 29 pass and retain. File item 30, AB 199. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 199 by Assemblymember Ma and others, and Act relating to school curriculum.
Ms. Ma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. AB 199 simply provides that social science instruction in grades 7 to 12 include the significant role of Filipino soldiers in World War II and ensures that our children and future generations learn about their sacrifice. When this bill was originally introduced in 2004, there were 98 Filipino World War II veterans that were still alive to tell their stories. Today, there are only 17 veterans still alive. It is our duty and their right to ensure that these brave men have their courageous feats on record along with the American soldiers they served with. Any law or textbook which claims some soldiers who fought for our nation deserves less than their brothers in arms is unacceptable. AP 199 does not create a new state mandate. It honors the heroic feats of our soldiers and ensures that our soldiers are not left out from the pages of history. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Norby.
Mr. Speaker, I did not support this bill in education because I don't believe it's the purpose of this legislature to micromanage curriculum and to mandate things that are already occurring. As a former high school history teacher who spent a lot of time on World War II, I can assure everyone in this body that to teach about the Filipinos' role in World War II is like teaching about the French role in World War I. It is central, it is done, and it's not necessary to put this into law. And to put this into law would open us up to a whole panoply of requests of many groups to be added to the textbook when that is not the job of this body, it's the job of other authorities that we've delegated this responsibility to.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, those of you that were in committee when this bill was heard, you were witness to a rare event. And the event was that we had a number of Philippine American World War II veterans. I tell you, there's not many around. And I'll tell you, I've been in a lot of committees. That's the first time I've ever seen them get a standing ovation. And part of the reason they were there to testify was obviously on behalf of this bill to encourage the role of these individuals in World War II. Why underscore that? Why? Because you have to understand the history of what happened to these individuals. That were part of the Commonwealth of the United States. That were part of the military forces. That gave their blood, their sweat, their tears, their lives, their homes, everything. And then what happened at the end of World War II? The United States did an about-face and said, we don't want any part of you guys. It was a shame. And it was very, very touching. We have run this bill before, and I beg to differ with my colleague about the importance of this, because there was an injustice, and one that because there has been this injustice, we've basically written these individuals and their role out of what has happened in American history, it's as if what was in there, is gradually just disappearing from the textbooks that do contain any reference to it. And the textbooks I saw are very few and far between. Don't forget, I was not only a veteran, I also taught American history. And this is something that, at least in our small way, says something about these individuals that are dying as we speak right now. It is to us, the living, to remember their role, their colleagues, their fallen colleagues, and I think it's the least we can do for those warriors of the past. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo.
Members, these brave men who gave great sacrifice to our nation are part of what's called the greatest generation. These men sacrificed their lives so that we could enjoy the form of democracy that we enjoy today. I'm proud to have authored a legislation that provides these men with some modest degree of compensation for their efforts. It was, as our colleague says, supposed to be part of a budget deal after World War II. But they were written out of the budget, and I'm proud that California, as it does in so many ways, has led the way and does provide benefits for these men. If we provide benefits for these men as an acknowledgement of their role in history, then why shouldn't we acknowledge that history? It just seems to follow that if we recognize their sacrifice, and if we, the state of California, are willing to commit ourselves and provide some modest compensation for what they've done, should we not let the world know how deserving they are? And should that not be taught to the young men and women of this state? I also concur and ask for an aye vote on this measure.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. I'm sure everybody knows that Assemblyman Cedillo is here for a return engagement after 8 years in the Senate. But when he was a freshman assembly person, he brought that bill, I believe the first bill forward, acknowledging and recognizing the role of Filipino-American veterans during World War II. I want to thank Fiona Ma for bringing this bill again, because we've done it every year that I've been here, and it was vetoed in the past, unfortunately. I also know, because of being in different committees with Mr. Norby, that he happens to be an excellent senior high school history teacher. He's talked about the World War II experience with Japanese Americans. He ably pointed out on the floor when we honored Earl Warren that, in fact, when he was the governor, he was the one responsible for putting Japanese in camp during World War II. So I know he knows World War II well. Unfortunately, Mr. Norby, not all the teachers, nor do the textbooks that our students read, have this important central story, as you said, in the textbooks. So I think this bill that Fiona is bringing, Mrs. Ma is bringing, is very important, not only because it's an important chapter, but because also this particular example of those veterans that fought under the American flag that were Filipino were the only group that had their veteran rights in a rescission act taken away from them, and we've been battling ever since, it seems, to try to get it back. I believe about 2 months ago we had an adjourn in memory of for an individual named Papin Baplig. Manon Papin Baplig was a Filipino-American veteran. He has since passed away. There are very few left. They can't tell the story any longer because we're losing them. So let's doggone it, put it in our textbooks, and I urge an aye vote, and I thank Fiona for bringing this forward.
Ms. Ma, you may close.
Thank you, members. And I first want to thank my co-author, Colonel Cook. This is the second time we're working on this bill together. Not only is he a decorated veteran, but a very astute American history teacher in his own right. As we've all know, he can recite history for long periods of time with great detail. So I want to thank him for his passion. And as he said, the history books, less and less, are talking about this event instead of more and more, even though the Filipino Americans have been at Congress fighting for their just benefits. We believe that there are still an opportunity to capture the real stories from the real people themselves instead of through people, historians that are going to go back and recreate the stories. There's only 17 World War II Filipino veterans left today. We have been putting together archives, Mr. Rudy Asercion in my district, since 2000. And we just want their story to be told. This is not a mandate. This is encouraging the social study curriculums to report while we still have the people who can report it best, the veterans themselves. Respectfully ask for your aye vote, members.
Seeing no further questions in debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 68, no 0. The measure passes. Members, if you could please join me in welcoming former Assemblyman Dave Elder, who is in the rear of the chambers. Okay, we're going to go a little bit out of order to file item 27, H.R. 11. Clerk will read.
House Resolution 11 by Assemblymember Ammiano relative to domestic workers' rights.
Mr. Ammiano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues, in California, there are around 200,000 domestic workers who serve as housekeepers, nannies, and caregivers in private homes. And according to estimates from the International Labor Organization, there are 100 million persons, predominantly women, who labor as domestic workers around the world and in the U.S. Domestic work is among the top 20 occupations for women. Domestic workers play a critical role in our global economy, working to ensure the health and prosperity of families and enabling others to participate in the workforce. However, despite the importance of their work, domestic workers have historically been and are still economically and socially marginalized. Through H.R. 11, the California State Assembly joins numerous countries around the world in recognizing International Domestic Worker Day. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 48, noes 15. The measure passes. File items 31 through 33 pass and retain. File item 34, AB 413. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 413 by Assemblymember Yamada, an act relating to elections.
Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to present AB 413, which would permit Yolo County to conduct up to 3 local elections as all mail, or should I say all postal ballots. I just want to make that clarification. For those of you who have been on this floor with me the last couple of years, you might recall that I presented this bill twice before, successfully reached the governor's desk, but unfortunately I was not able to secure a previous governor's signature. We are continuing to work on this issue because of the trend and the increase in those who wish to participate in the democratic process by using a postal ballot. Members, Yolo County has an independently elected Yolo County elections officer, and would be determined in cooperation with local jurisdictions within the county which of the up to three locally determined all postal ballot elections would be permitted. I am proud to say that we have the support of the League of California Cities, the City Clerks Association of California, the Regional Council of Rural Counties, as well as Californians for Disability Rights in bringing this measure forward again. I would ask for an aye vote and hope that we can encourage especially the study component of this bill. This is not just to conduct all postal elections for postal elections' sake. It is to determine whether this type of election increases turnout. We certainly know it already saves costs, and I look forward to continuing to work in conversation as this bill moves forward. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and respectfully to the author. My concern with this bill is that it's starting down a path of 100% absentee balloting, which I don't really support. Reason being is that we've found a lot of voter fraud in absentee ballots. Very, very easy. Once the ballot is separated from the envelope, there's no tracking where they come from. You could have 10 people all making them up in one house. And I have seen this happen before. I don't know how many of you have ever done accounts at recounts of elections. I have done so, and I have seen some very mysterious things with absentee ballots. So while people can absentee ballot, and I support that, I am a constant absentee ballot voter. I would not like to have this be the only method, nor even have a test case of it being the only method, because I do think that we have to get a better handle on how we qualify absentee ballots, how we count them, and how we review them before we continue or we even begin a path of seeing if maybe this is a preferred way to vote. People can absentee ballot vote. They can choose to go to a polling place. If we need to limit polling places to fewer, and sometimes I can understand that. I think, quite honestly, if we had fewer elections and maybe just the regular elections, we would probably have a more accurate turnout and actually see people voting more frequently. I think the problem we face right now is, quite honestly, voter burnout, because we're constantly putting some sort of initiative or something on the ballot in a special election. So I can't support this at this time. I appreciate the author's request to do so, but I would hope until we get a handle on what occurs in all the absentee balloting that we don't move forward with any processes. Thank you.
Ms. Yamato, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to respond to some of the concerns raised by my colleague, Ms. Harkey. First of all, we've had a 10-year period in California in which permanent absentee balloting has been available. I agree that we do have that option now. We do see the trends increasing every year, every election actually. More and more people are going to this preferred method of voting. We also have a state like Oregon that has had all postal balloting for over 20 years, and we have seen an increase in voter participation as well as the decrease in costs. And finally, what I would say is any one of us that ever witnesses voter fraud has a duty and an obligation to report it. There's not one of us on this floor, I believe, that would support any willful or knowing enabling of voter fraud. And so I think we have sufficient safeguards. Members, this is a district bill, very limited in scope, and would design to study some of the issues that are raised by Ms. Harkey's question. So again, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 49, noes 19. The measure passes. File items 35 through 37 pass and retain. File item 38, AB 799. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 799 with amendments by Assemblymember Swanson.
Mr. Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today for floor amendments to AB 799, which will extend the diversion program for the sexually exploited minors in the Alameda County program. AB 799 passed the Public Safety Committee last week with unanimous support. The pilot program was established in 2008 by a cooperative agreement between law enforcement, the Alameda County DA's office, community organizations, local police officers, providing services to sexually exploited minors. The floor amendments that I asked you to adopt today add a reporting requirements which would require the District Attorney of Alameda County to submit a report to the legislature before the bill sunsets. That includes a number of minors who were diverted through the program and the type of treatment and services that they received. I would ask that the bill go out to print and be placed back on file.
So any objection to a voice vote? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Out to print and back on file. File item 39, AB 807. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 807 by Assemblymember Solorio, an act relating to vehicles.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill would authorize representatives of the administrative agency responsible for permitting taxicabs to review driving records produced through enrollment in the voluntary employer pool notice program within the DMV. Currently, driving records can be checked every year, but incidents can occur in between those annual reviews. AB 807 is about public safety and would ensure taxi drivers maintain a valid California driver's license and are not involved in a disqualifying incident. Thank you, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 72, no 0. The measure passes. File items 40 through 43, pass and retain.
File item 4, AB 65. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 65 by Assemblymember Gatto, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, a few weeks ago, we celebrated Sunshine Week on this very floor. Sunshine Week was not about the sun that shines in California, but about letting the sunshine into our process and make sure that people are aware and informed of the decisions that we make as a government and who's trying to influence our government. AB 65 is a very simple sunshine measure. It simply requires that the top 5 contributors to and against any ballot initiative be printed right there in the ballot pamphlet. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
See, Mr. Norby.
I'd ask for a no vote on this, Madam Speaker. I know that my colleague is only trying to open up and provide more information to the public, and I do respect that, but I think that information is already there for those that want it. Also, it would only apply to contributions prior to 110 days before the election. So those after that, which is 3 months period of time when a lot of money can be spent, would not be included. And this also applies only to statewide ballot propositions rather than statewide candidates. So maybe we ought to look at that too.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Gatto, you may close.
So I thank Mr. Norby for his comments, and I understand where they're coming from. I'll just do a little things to address a couple of them. First of all, about the candidates. We are limited by $3,900 contributions. Ballot initiatives are not. So one could imagine that if we had to list our biggest contributors, the list would be a mile long. However, for ballot initiatives, that list is often pretty small, and you can tell in many cases who is behind the measure by who the top 5 biggest contributors are. As for the cutoff date, yes, at some point we do have to print the ballots. We do have to cut off the, at that point in time, who the biggest contributors are. But often with a ballot initiative, you can tell exactly who is funding it by who was the proponents of, or the opponents of the ballot initiative from the very first moment. So with that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 48, noes 21. Measure passes. File item 45, AB 84. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 84 by Assemblymember Fong, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Fong.
Madam Chair and members, AB 84 ensures all U.S. citizens have the right to vote in California elections by allowing individuals who become citizens after the voter registration deadline to register and vote until the close of polls on Election Day. These citizens are fully eligible to vote under California's Constitution, but are denied the most basic democratic right because of a timing problem. This is especially relevant in presidential elections where a new citizen should be able to cast a vote for the future leader of a nation he or she just pledged citizenship to. Most new citizens are enthusiastic to cast their first ballot in an election, but when their first experience is one of denial because of a naturalization ceremony was held after the voter registration deadline, it may discourage future participation in the democratic process. This is not the message our state should be sending. Rather, AB 84 proposes California should do everything we can to maximize participation in our state's electoral process. For these reasons, I respectfully request your aye vote.
Mr. Donnelly.
Yes, I rise in opposition to this measure. I think all of us are passionate about getting new citizens involved in the process, and I join my colleague in that desire. But I think we already have a process, and it allows someone to vote up to 15 days out from the election. To allow them to vote on the same day is something that could be gamed. It could create more fraud and create more opportunities for our actual electoral process to be undermined. And so I respectfully urge a no vote.
Mr. Logue.
Yeah, I also respectfully urge a no vote. They already have the ability to vote 7 days before the election. We are concerned with massive fraud in elections as we are in the last 2 years. So I think this is not the right move at the right time. I respectfully vote no. Thank you.
Ms. Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to actually request that the author, I think it's a good bill. I think it's a good idea to get as many people who are eligible to vote, who have met citizen requirements, who have turned 18 to vote as possible. I do have some concerns about the bill that I think could actually help address some of the opposition, which is we have a process for 18-year-olds right now. We allow them to register as long as their birthday is going to be before Election Day. And we had to turn away a lot of 18-year-olds in this last election who really wanted to vote but didn't meet the deadline. And if we could work on something that would be the same policy for both our young citizens and our new citizens, I think we can increase access and have more people registering. And maybe if they know their new citizen swearing in is going to be the day before the election, go in and register in advance just like we have 18-year-olds, but make the date be the same for both the 18-year-olds and the new citizens so that we get everybody participating who's eligible to vote on Election Day. But I'm going to support the bill because I think it encourages people to vote. So thank you.
Mr. Norby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question, a clarification for the author.
Without objection.
The swearing-in ceremonies themselves are very large public events. Most of us here have attended them. They're very, very impressive. But it would seem that the INS or the ICE or whatever they're called would know about the next coming election, so they would schedule these appropriately. I presume they do that with that in mind. Maybe they don't, but I presume they do, and so that this kind of situation would not arise other than perhaps certain local special elections that the INS couldn't anticipate.
Mr. Fong, you may close.
Well, the people are fully eligible to vote. They should be able to vote. And so I respectfully request an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 49, noes 23. The measure passes. File item 46, AB 123. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 123 by Assemblymember Mendoza, an act relating to school safety.
Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm here to present AB 123, which gives the school administrators and local law enforcement the authority to address disruptions that threaten the physical safety of children in preschool, elementary school, and middle school while they're coming to, leaving from, or attending school. The need for this bill arose from a lawsuit filed from the Center for Bioethical Reform against the Los Angeles County Sheriff and now the Unified School District. In this case, the Sheriff's Department had intervened to control a demonstration that threatened student safety. The Center for Bioethical Reform filed a subsequent lawsuit. The lower court upheld the actions of the sheriff, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals held that the Penal Code Section 626.8 did not permit school administrators to contact local law enforcement. However, the Ninth Circuit acknowledged that if the California legislature adopted statutory language to address this situation, the outcome would have been different. That's why we are here today to present this bill. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Norby.
I would ask for a no vote, Madam Speaker. I know that the author is motivated by school safety. He and I both have young children in public schools, and their safety is our paramount priority. But I believe additional bills creating additional classes of misdemeanors is probably the last place we want to go in light of jail and prison overcrowding. Also, school violence, if you look at the objective statistics, not just the scary anecdotes, is going down in California as it is nationwide. So giving law enforcement and principals additional tools to charge people with misdemeanors, I don't believe is appropriate, especially in this case where the original motivation had to do with political speech, the political speech of people who are demonstrating against abortion. I've had anti-abortion demonstrators protesting across the street from schools I've taught at, and the pictures that they held weren't particularly pleasant. Some of the things they said might not have been pleasant, but far from disruptive. It was actually a teaching moment where my kids could engage and talk about a number of different issues. Civil liberties does cut both ways, and I would warn all of my colleagues here, regardless of their persuasion on this particular issue or any issue, that any law, however well intended, which allows people to be classified as misdemeanants simply because they're demonstrating for or against a political position on public property near a school, not on school property, but simply near a school, is a slippery slope, which I would hesitate to go down. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in opposition as well. We're told that this bill will give to school principals and school administrators authority to address disruptions, and I would like to suggest that that authority already exists in the law. There are a number of protections that school administrators have to address disruptions, including the trespassing laws. What we've done here instead, unfortunately, is, as has been stated previously, create a new class of crime, and a new class of crime without the necessary standards in the law. Someone can now commit a crime if they are adjacent to streets and sidewalks of a school. The streets and sidewalks are public rights of way. What is adjacent? Is it down the street? Is it immediately next door? Is it 2 blocks away? Does it depend on the political message that the speaker is carrying? Because if it does, then we end up with some First Amendment violations potentially. We end up putting our principals and school administrators in a delicate position if they personally oppose the point of view of a speaker and the speaker is too close for their comfort. Are they adjacent to the school? Are they now empowered to have that person arrested and charged with a misdemeanor? If they like the message of the speaker, can the speaker creep maybe a little bit closer and not run the risk of criminal liability? Those are questions, as I see it, completely unaddressed in this legislation. Substantial constitutional amendments completely unaddressed in this legislation, and legislation that merely adds criminal penalties without significantly adding to what already exists. As the author says, the authority to address disruption. That's there. We don't need to add this extra layer. For those reasons, my friends, I urge a no vote on this piece of legislation.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate very much, members, the debate and the discussion relative to civil liberties and people's right to speech, etc. but the key component that Mr. Mendoza's bill addresses is student safety. The issue of free speech, if they're talking to a kindergartner and using, as Mr. Norby said, whatever signs or whatever pictures around whatever issue they want, if it jeopardizes the child, that's a concern. Concern about keeping sex offenders away from soliciting immediately in front of a school is a law that we already have in place. The issue here is not the political speech or the topic of the discussion. The issue here is child safety. I will be bringing a bill to you as well in a short time that was presented to me by students from Lakewood High School because of them being accosted and really approached and almost in fact offended by people as they were trying to go to and from school. We're talking about minors here, we're not talking about adults, and we're talking about people trying to impose whatever their issue may be on these individuals that are minors. So the issue is minors, the issue is the question of safety for our students, and I urge and I vote for this bill.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, but Mr. Speaker and members, only to point out a few facts. The first one is that with respect to minors, the courts, the U.S. Supreme Court has held that a higher standard can be approved when it comes to protection of minors, that it isn't the same analysis as applies to adults. And so you need to ask yourself in this case whether or not you would allow your first grader, second grader, third grader, fourth grader, fifth grader, and so on, to see aborted fetuses on the television. And if you wouldn't want them to see it there, then they shouldn't be doing that at a school ground. But that said, the bill is actually very specific. It says any person who willfully or knowingly creates a disruption with the intent, there's a specific intent law, with the intent to threaten the immediate physical safety of K-8 pupils arriving at attending. So whoever is causing this disruption must have the intent to threaten the physical safety. And I think therein lies the protection for First Amendment and for the children. I ask for an aye vote.
Ms. Halderman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is already illegal to threaten a child, and that's definitely not a First Amendment right. In terms of what we expose our children to, I'm remembering rather vividly the decision of the American Nazi Party to march in Skokie, and my parents' decision to allow us as children to view that, to understand not only that the First Amendment really is about objectionable speech, but that we are not victims when faced with those who are exercising those rights in a way that is offensive to us. And in that case, my mother's decision was to allow us to make T-shirts and signs that opposed what the American Nazi Party was promoting in Skokie, Illinois. I would respectfully ask for your no vote.
Mr. Donnelly.
Yes, I rise in opposition to this bill because I think we should tread very carefully when we talk about infringing our First Amendment rights, regardless of the subject matter, regardless of the political viewpoint. I think, as others have mentioned, they would be great teachable moments for our children to understand that if we're having a political debate, if we're allowing people to exercise the great First Amendment, and what is that First Amendment? It is the right to lawfully assemble and seek redress of our grievances from our government, just like you can hear the crowds outside today. I think it is important that the people be heard, and the children don't need to be sheltered from that. If there's images the teachers don't want them to see, the teachers can shield their eyes. But I think, it would be nice if right now in the educational establishment, I'm getting letters every day from school children that are written in their classrooms that are addressed to my office from their school. So our children have been pulled into the political debate. They've been turned into lobbyists on behalf of various interest groups like the teachers and like those who would like our taxes raised. So I think that's something that we should address rather than try to silence the voice of the people when an administrator can simply call authorities and have anybody who is a danger to the children removed right now under current law. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Pan.
Mr. Speaker, members, I urge that we an aye vote on this measure. I certainly, understand what my opponents have said, what the opponents of the bill have said concerning, shielding children and First Amendment rights, and certainly I want to be sure that our First Amendment rights are strongly protected. However, I do not see this bill as infringing on our First Amendment rights to be able to petition our government. Certainly, I would not want to deny my constituents, any of your constituents, any of the members to petition us here outside and here in the Capitol. But I think we need to keep in mind that schools and children, children are at a different developmental stage. While I think it's appropriate to have teachable moments, those need to be done with the guidance and supervision of adults, and that those adults need to be able to exercise some ability to be able to ensure that the children are protected. So while I certainly want to be sure that we don't want to fetter First Amendment rights, we need to also understand that where they are most appropriately directed, and that should be toward those of us who are making decisions and those of us who are active citizens, and that we should, in terms of our children, educating our children, it should be done in partnership with their parents and other adults who are working and supervising them. Thank you.
Mr. Mendoza, you may close.
Thank you, members. I just want to mention that we work very closely with the ACLU to ensure that freedom of speech was protected. We did not include high school students. We're talking about students who are in middle school, elementary school, preschool. We're talking about their safety and their well-being. It's not a big ask. I don't think I don't see how we could ask our teachers to be running around, whether students are going to school or back home, running around trying to shield them from whatever's out there in the community or whoever's purposely trying to harm them in any way. So, members, I just respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 53, noes 16. The measure passes. File item 47, pass and retain. File item 48, AB 194. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 194 by Assemblymember Bell, an act relating to post-secondary education.
Mr. Bell.
Mr. Speaker and members, thank you very much for allowing me to present this bill today. Foster youth and former foster youth face significant barriers to accessing higher education. Over 70% of youth in foster care want to go to college, but only about 20% of foster youth actually do. And only 2 to 3% of former foster youth actually graduate from college with a 4-year degree. To address this issue, AB 194 will provide priority enrollment for classes to foster youth and former foster youth at California's public colleges and universities. The cost to the state will be minor and absorbable, but our impact on this vulnerable population can be huge. And I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Donnelly.
Yes, I respectfully rise in opposition to this bill. While I share my colleagues' concern for foster youth and their success in higher education and other places, I think we need to be careful before creating priorities for one group over another. I think what could be an answer to this problem would be for retired teachers perhaps to act as mentors to help them get the classes that they need, to help walk them through the process. I think there's a lot of ways this issue can be addressed. I would be in favor if they were in service for our country and they were veterans who had gone and served and fought and died. Then they would be a merit-based group where I could say, hey, you've gone and done something above and beyond. You're not just the member of a group that that wants to consider itself victims. I think we really need to rise above that and say, let's invite them to come and be in this great experiment with all of us, and let's have volunteers stand up and maybe reach out a hand instead of creating a government-based exemption and special status. Thank you.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. I think this bill is needed at this time. The foster children, of all the children that we have in this state, are the ones who start 10 yards behind. I think this is a good bill that will help them give a leg up and compete in the private sector. So I wholeheartedly support this bill, and I commend the author. Thank you.
Mr. Bell, you may close.
Mr. Speaker, members, the foster youth have been placed in the responsibility of the county and the state of California. They are our responsibility, and it's entirely appropriate as responsible parents that we as the people are for the foster youth, that we help them get their higher education. I urge an aye vote on this bill.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 61, noes 6. The measure passes. File item 49, AB 293. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 293 by Assembly Member Hill, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 293 will provide California vote-by-mail voters the ability to verify that their ballots were counted. As we know and have discussed today, an ever-increasing number of Californians are voting by mail. Close to 60% of the ballots cast in the November 2010 election were vote-by-mail ballots. Currently, these voters have no way of knowing if their ballot was included in the final canvass. Elections officials already have a free access system where provisional voters can find out if their ballot was counted. AB 293 takes the next logical step for vote-by-mail voters. In addition to determining if their ballot was counted, AB 293 will also allow those voters whose ballots were not counted to find out the reason why. So many people who have applied for absentee ballots do so 10, 20, 25 years ago, and their signatures may have changed in that period of time. And they have no way, when the ballot comes forward today, it could be disqualified, and they'd never know that and never know in the future if their ballot was counted or not. This will enable them to address and rectify the problem for future elections. The Assembly passed a virtually identical measure last session by a 75-1 vote. AB 293 has the support of election officials and no known opposition. I respectfully ask for your aye votes.
Mr. Norby.
I was the one no vote in appropriations, and I may be the only no vote here, but that's fine. I do respect the author's intent, but there are three concerns. Number one, this is a local option. The counties can do this now. Each county is governed by a directly elected board of supervisors. And if they want to do this, now they can, and many of them do. And so I don't think that we should mandate this on them. Number two, if voters want the same assurances that precinct voters now get that their votes are counted, then they should go to the precinct, their local precinct, and vote. And that was the custom in the state for many, many years until voting by mail became something that, yeah, maybe it's a convenience for a lot of people, but has also changed our elections. And one could argue for the worse. It used to be you could have voter turnout, you could have a lot of things at the last few weeks, volunteers, candidate walking door to door, and that could sway an election. Now many of us have walked door to door, and unless we have precinct lists updated to that day, we're meeting a lot of people that would have voted for us or would have voted for a candidate that came to the door, except they've already voted by mail, and they don't have all the information that they should. Also, if a voter finds out that his vote has not been counted, then what does he do? I mean, there really isn't any redress there. The registrar can always say they didn't get it in the mail and blame the post office. But at that point, I'm not sure how this would really improve the system. It's probably going to pass, but I think before we pass more mandates on this to local government, we should ask ourselves how they're going to be paid for, and if encouraging the slippery slope toward an all-male voting system, that's M-A-I-L, all-male voting system, is that really the way we want to go?
Mr. Hill, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In response to my good friend, Mr. Norby's, I'm sorry, Mr. Jeffries.
Mr. Jeffries, you are recognized.
I probably was going to give his closing statement. I rise in support of the bill. I think this is actually accountability for the elections, the registrar of voters in every county. If we have this implemented, in my county we do now, and we have a history of significant trouble with voter registration programs and voter counting, I think this brings about a certain level of accountability. A voter can now identify under this scenario whether or not their vote is being counted. And I think that is the ultimate accountability in our democracy, and I encourage an aye vote.
Okay, Mr. Hill, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Mr. Jeffries for making my close. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no, I've got Ms. Harkey would like to speak on this as well. All right, Ms. Harkey.
I just wanted to make a clarification. Last year I was the only no vote, and I can't for the life of me think of why, because maybe it was just a wrong button. I don't know, because I did support this. I recalled supporting this last year, and I do support it this year only because it really only affects really a few counties. Most of the counties already do this and have the availability, and it's not really going to cost them anything. As much as I am not trying to encourage just all vote by mail ballots, I do think that when you do vote by mail, I like to check, and I do check and appreciate the fact that I can check to see my votes counted. So I think last year was a snafu.
Ms. Harkey, that was habit. Okay, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally vote. Ayes 72, no 0. The measure passes. File item 50, pass and retain. File item 51, AB 300. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 300 by Assembly Member Ma, an act relating to body art.
Ms. Ma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Assembly Bill 300, the Safe Body Art Act, provides comprehensive statewide standards for tattooing, body piercing, and the application of permanent cosmetics in California. Without AB 300, current law will continue to allow backstreet tattooing and piercing in unsanitary facilities by unregistered practitioners. It's amazing that to be a manicurist, if you want to perform a pedicure or manicure, you need 400 hours of training to be able to do so. Yet if you want to tattoo someone or pierce someone on their body, you do not need any type of training or education. AB 300 does not have any opposition and passed without a single no vote. Respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no question or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally vote. Ayes 64, no 0. The measure passes. File items 52 through 54, pass and retain. File item 55, ACR 45. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurrent resolution 45 by Assembly Member Perea relative to Crime Victims' Rights Week.
Mr. Perea.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. ACR 45 declares the week of April 10th to April 16th, 2011 as Crime Victims' Rights Week in California. This year's theme is the commemoration of 30 years of National Crime Victim Rights Week. Crime Victims' Rights Week is observed nationwide as a time to honor victims and the advocates of victims' rights. In 2009, 20 million crimes were committed in the United States. 4.3 million of those crimes were violent and 15.6 million were property crimes. All Californians are affected by crime. And I just want to kind of share a personal story and why I take this. When I was asked to take this resolution to our floor, why I didn't hesitate. Back when I was in high school, when I was a senior at San Joaquin Memorial High School, I had a good friend of mine, Jennifer Herrada, who was the victim and who was in a very abusive relationship. Now, none of us really understood what was going on or even knew what was going on until it was too late, and one day her abusive, jealous boyfriend killed her in her living room. And so, colleagues, I would just ask or just say that I'm here today not only on behalf of my good friend, Jennifer Herrada, but on behalf of all of victims of crime. And so I respectfully ask to open the roll for co-authors and ask for your aye vote on ACR 45. Thank you very much.
Mr. Alejo.
Thank you, members. I rise in support of this resolution recognizing Crime Victims' Right Week in California, but it's the week that we're also recognizing that throughout the state, throughout our country. This issue hits close to home in the 28th District. In Monterey County last year, our communities faced high rates of youth violent crime. In fact, Monterey County suffered the highest per capita youth murder rate in the state of California. And I want to take this opportunity to remember and honor all those victims of gang and domestic violence. Just last year, a year ago this month, we were walking in a procession in memory of a 6-year-old boy, Azael Cruz, who was shot in a drive-by shooting in East Salinas. The families suffer trauma for many years to come, and we always like to remind people these are not statistics, but these are our brothers and sisters, our family members that we have to care about, and in our policies and our decisions, not let these names be forgotten. This hits close to home because I lost my own aunt, a victim of domestic violence several years ago. And at the age of 19, I began organizing and engaging and trying to bring peace to our streets after the tragic death of a 9-year-old girl, Jessica Cortez, and her 16-year-old brother, Jorge, after their mom sent them on an errand to a local bakery. And ever since then, I've been working with families who have lost their loved ones to violence, who for them it was very difficult to engage in activism and trying to bring peace to our toughest neighborhoods in our communities. So I wanted to also have us remember those who champion for peace every day, week after week. Many of these are family members. Many of them are leaders in their neighborhood groups. Many are civic leaders, but also law enforcement leaders. People have dedicated themselves to work collaboratively to bring peace to our neighborhoods. And I just remember the words of Dr. King, who said that peace is not merely a distant goal we seek, but it's a means by which we arrive at that goal as well. So I want to take a moment. Let's honor those who are the champions for peace every day in our communities and ask for your aye vote on this resolution.
So, members, Mr. Perea has asked for the first roll to be open for co-authors. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and let the record reflect that this measure has 73 co-authors. We can now take a voice vote on this measure. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, the measure is adopted. Okay, we're going to move to the consent calendar. We're at the second day consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the second day consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 946 by Assemblymember Butler, an act relating to taxation.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 73, no 0.
Assembly Bill 1392.
Ayes 73, no 0.
Assembly Bill 1305.
Ayes 73, no 0.
Assembly Bill 426.
Ayes 73, no 0.
And Assembly Bill 434.
Ayes 73, no 0. Okay, we're going to now move to motions and resolutions. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, pursuant to Rule 96, I move AB 127 by Mr. Logue and AB 273 by Mr. Valadao from the Accountability Administrative Review Committee to the Business Professions and Consumers Protection Committee, and then back to the Accountability Committee.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Although I'm not necessarily questioning the steering of these two different committees, but I do want to object to the process we're going through here. Neither bill has had amendments taken at this point, and we see no reason to change on the middle of the fly the different committees. So I would ask for a no vote on this.
Okay, Mr. Calderon's motion requires a second. I see a second by Mr. Allen. We will now move to a roll call vote on the motion. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. Again, Mr. Calderon's asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. 41 votes. Okay. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 47, noes 24. The motion is adopted. Session schedule is as follows. Tuesday, April 12th, we have check-in session. Wednesday, April 13th, we have check-in session. Thursday, April 14th, we have floor session at 9 a.m. and spring recess begins upon adjournment. Friday, April 15th is recess. Monday, April 18th through the 22nd is recess. All of the items remaining will be passed and retained, and all motions shall be continued. We're going to now move to adjourn in memories. The following members were given previous permission to speak on adjourn in memory. Mr. Fong.
Thomas Peter Sparacino was an educator in my district and a husband to the Santa Clara City Council City Manager Jennifer Sparacino. I'd like to say a few brief words to honor the memory of Thomas Peter Sparacino. Tom was born in San Jose in June 1942 and passed away recently in his home in Santa Clara. Tom served our great nation in the Vietnam War and earned the rank of sergeant in the U.S. Army Reserve. He was an accomplished marksman and won several United States Practical Shooting Association competitions. He was also a talented artist who was skilled in the disciplines of painting, photography, and mixed media. However, Tom will be remembered most for his love of teaching. Tom was a photographer teacher at San Jose City College, and for 35 years he taught art at the Santa Clara Adult Education Center. It was at the Adult Education Center where his dedication to the arts changed the lives of so many students. One of his former students, who is blind, credited his positive attitude and his precise way of teaching her how to paint as the reason she found her calling in life. Without Tom, she said, her business, the Art of Possibility Studio, which provides an avenue for artists with disabilities to represent their work, would not have been possible. Thomas Sparacino, survived by his wife of 45 years, Santa Clara City Manager Jennifer Sparacino, and his lovely daughter, Brooklyn Sparacino. I ask that we adjourn in his memory.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today I rise in memory of Cam Kawada, who was sadly found dead early this morning. Cam was a political genius who shared his talent and conviction with candidates and causes in Los Angeles and throughout the state and, quite frankly, across the country. He died unexpectedly at his home, a loss to his family and friends. Cam was a Democratic political consultant for more than 25 years. He was the brains and the heart of many successful campaigns, particularly those of California Senators Alan Cranston and Dianne Feinstein. Cam also performed admirably for President Obama, Senator Akaka, Mayor Jim Hahn, Representative Jane Harman, Leo McCarthy, Gray Davis, and many others. He was a proud graduate of USC and known to enjoy a good cigar and perhaps a glass or two of Maker's Mark. Cam often referred to himself as a hack, but he was anything but a hack. He backed up his campaign skills with deep knowledge and strong beliefs. He was respected and admired by many, including his contemporaries, his clients, and those he had mentored to become the next generation of committed and caring political consultants. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and the vast extended political family that he leaves behind. I ask that we adjourn in his memory.
Mr. Cedillo.
I also must rise to ask that we adjourn in the memory of Cam Quata. I cannot even digest this news that I just heard a few hours ago. As the speaker said, anyone who knew him, regardless of your perspective, what your point of view, admired and respected him as a brilliant strategist, and he was that. But if you got to know him personally, you got to know that he was a kind man, that he was generous, that he was wickedly funny, and that he was soft-spoken. He really was a gentleman, and if you ever were around him, you could see how he was one of those persons that everybody clustered around. He did have his like of the cigar and the Maker's Mark and of the bow tie. He was an elegant man and a gentleman, and his loss is unbelievable and will be felt by many for a very long time.
Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise in memory of Cam Kawada, who I am fortunate to call a friend and a mentor. He was a tremendous man. You wanted to work with him on campaigns. You wanted to have him on your side. He was vicious on the campaign. But to Mr. Cedillo's point, he was a very gentle soul. He was a humanist. He often held many of us in office or those who were aspiring to be in office to a standard that meant absolute stewardship and service. Many of you will remember that he worked for many elected officials, and he was brilliant in his strategy, but also steadfast in his absolute respect for words. And he often would make certain that folks communicated exactly what it was that they intended to do. And as I mentioned, he would make sure that folks held their word. And he would really be frowning down on all of us now by speaking so much on his behalf. He was an amazing man, a tremendous man, and I'm sorry to hear of his loss. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with great sadness that I rise to adjourn in memory of Dr. Baruch Blumberg, who passed away last Tuesday at the age of 85. Dr. Blumberg was the pivotal force behind the discovery of the hepatitis B virus, which causes severe liver cancer and disease, and he later developed the vaccine that protects against it. His isolation of this disease and the test he created to screen people's blood for hepatitis B were key beginning steps that eventually led to the development and implementation of the vaccine today, which has saved millions of lives and is universally one of the most widely used vaccines. Dr. Baruch Blumberg, known by his friends as Barry, was born July in my home state of New York in 1925. His legacy is one that has made a lasting impression on the science world and has personally affected my life with his life-saving advancements in regards to hepatitis B. The world is forever grateful for his commitment, intelligence, and valor. He is survived by his wife of 57 years, the former Jean Liebesman, his 2 sons, 2 daughters, and 9 grandchildren.
Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I rise in adjournment of Dorothy Dottie Mae Hawk, a woman that we warmly refer to as Dottie. She was a youth advocate, a veterans volunteer, and a church leader. She exemplified unselfish community service for 7 decades. She loved to donate her time and talents by singing and planning special outings, whether it was volunteering at the American Red Cross or distributing food, clothing, toys for the needy families in the area. She was always there, making a difference in our community. As a member of Pomona's concert band, she sang at the band's summer concerts, supervised the snack bar, and organized outings to the Hollywood Bowl concerts for members of the band. She enjoyed baking birthday cakes for the boys at the LA County probation camps. Dottie received her first volunteer award in 1940 and her final last December. Friends of Dottie remember her for her dedication to community, youth, music, education, and spiritual service. Dottie passed away on February 21st at age of 93, still volunteering. Dottie is survived by her husband of 66 years. Imagine that. And 3 grandchildren. We extend our sympathy and prayers to her family. Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to adjourn in memory of Christopher Michael Fielding, a 20-year-old young man from Riverside, California, who left us far too soon. Christopher was a classmate of my daughter, Marissa, and he was known for his intelligence and leadership. Chris was an honor roll student. He was studying to be a physical therapist at Cal State San Bernardino. He was a baseball player throughout his whole life, and he recently started his young coaching career. This young man had enormous potential. But he also made a significant difference in the community while he was with us. He believed in giving back, helping others. He participated in service projects like Christmas Cheer for the elderly, Walk for Food, and care packages for the military troops. He was one of California's most outstanding young men. We are joined today by his family. And so I'm going to ask that you join me, his brother Nick, his parents Todd and Sandy, as we adjourn this legislative session in the memory of Chris Fielding. We're going to miss you, Chris.
Thank you, members. Please bring those names to the desk to be printed in the journal. I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves, Mr. Hagman seconds, that this House stand adjourned until Thursday, April 14th at 9 a.m. Quorum call is lifted.
Valadeo, AB 123, switching from an aye to a no. Thank you.
Valadeo, Assembly Bill 123, aye to no.
Donnelly on AB 199, changed from aye to no vote. Donnelly, AB 199, changing from aye to not voting.
Donnelly, Assembly Bill 199, aye to not voting.